we have a moderator online now, and we have also a discussion that is now fully online, and I think that makes it a little bit easier for the speakers and the moderator. Let me introduce Jan Rosenow. Jan is the director of the European programs at the Regulatory Assistance Project, RAP. He's also a honorary research associate at Oxford University, and he is really a top energy influencer. If you are active on Twitter or on LinkedIn and you are in the energy field, I think it's impossible that you have not met Jan giving some very straight comments on aspects of the energy transition, in particular in heating. So Jan, I leave it to you to introduce the other two speakers or guests. That's Joachim Núñez de Almeida and Thomas Finke, and I'm looking forward to your discussion.
Thanks, Thomas, and good morning, everyone. I hope you have a wonderful time. It looks absolutely amazing where you are. I'm in Oxford in the UK from home. I would love to be there. Hopefully next time I can make it and be in Brussels with you. And what a time, for this event. We see, and you already discussed it in the previous session, gas prices at unprecedented levels. And we haven't even entered the winter. And a lot of people talk about a gas supply crisis. But I actually think this is in fact a gas demand crisis. And I say that because we are still overly reliant on fossil fuels in Europe, especially for heating, where fossil fuels comprise more than 3/4 of the energy demand. And what that means is that reducing the demand of fossil fuels for heating is absolutely critical for insulating us from future price shocks like the one we're experiencing right now. But in addition, and of course that is very much at the heart of the Green Deal and the Fit for 55 package, there's also a massive issue around carbon emissions. And just this morning I read in The Guardian that the carbon emissions from just domestic heating alone on the gas boilers in the UK are twice as high as all the emissions from power plants. Very few people know this. Very few people, when you ask the general public, are aware that this is in fact the single most important contribution that they make as individuals to climate change. So this is why this event and all the work that the European Heat Pump Association does is so important. And I often say that the last decade was all about discussing climate targets and moving from an 80% reduction to 100% by 2050 or even earlier. And the next decade that we just entered will have to be all about implementation. And clearly heat pumps are absolutely critical in all of that for reaching the climate neutrality goals that Europe has agreed on. And pretty much every single European study that has been conducted independently that model full decarbonization shows that heat pumps are one of the key technologies to bring down emissions. Also the IEA, I'm sure you've all seen their Net Zero 2050 report that came out over the summer, has identified heat pumps as by far the most important technology for replacing fossil heating and cooling. They assume that more than half of all buildings in 2050 will have a heat pump. But today in Europe, and these are numbers from the EHPA, I'm sure they have already changed because we see, I think, record deployment now of heat pumps. Only about 11% of all residential buildings in Europe actually have a heat pump. And then it needs to be much, much higher to reach the climate goals. We can discuss how much higher exactly, but just to give you a flavor, and this is from the European Commission's impact assessment, we need to replace about 1/4 of all the heating systems in Europe just in the period from 2026 to 2030 alone to meet the 55% carbon reduction target by 2030. That's a huge challenge, but also a very, very significant opportunity, for industry, for households, businesses who will benefit from this technology. And a very, very large share of the replacement of fossil heating systems will have to come from heat pumps. The question, of course, is how do we get there? And what's the role of industry? What's the role of the European Commission and policy? And that's the subject of this panel discussion. And I have the honor of chairing this discussion for the next, I think originally we scheduled 35 minutes. I can be quicker if Thomas tells me to be quicker. And we will be talking about energy policy and heat pumps. I'm particularly interested in hearing from the two panelists how we can ramp up the heat pump market in Europe, and what the Commission is doing, and the plans that have been put forward are highly relevant, of course, because of the recently published Fit for 55 package. I will also be asking what the industry needs to succeed, and I'm very glad that we have two excellent panelists to answer all of these questions this morning. I will start introducing the panelists now. I start with Joaquim Nunes de Almeida, who is the Director in charge of Mobility, Energy-Intensive Industries at the European Commission, and he works in the Directorate General for Internal Market, Industry, Entrepreneurship and SMEs, very long title, in short, DG GROW. And prior to this, Joaquim was the Director in charge of the Single Market Policy and Enforcement, also at DG GROW. He's got a very long career at the European Commission. I think I counted more than 26 years in total, approaching 27 years, and has extensive experience in policies related to the internal market and home affairs. So welcome, Joaquim. It's great to have you here. And people may wonder why we have invited someone from DG GROW and not DG Energy to this session. And the reason is that DG GROW actually does a surprising amount of work on energy issues. And in your role, Joaquim, at DG GROW, I think you work on policies related to energy-intensive industries, low-carbon mobility, as well as the green and circular economy. And I understand that you were actively involved in some of the work around the Fit for 55 package from an industrial perspective. So it's great to have you here to provide your unique insights and your perspective on this topic of European policy in the next minutes. Our second panelist actually comes from industry, and is Dr. Thomas Finke. He has an equally impressive resume. Welcome, Tom. Tom, you're the Vice President of the Residential Heat Pump Division at Bosch Thermotechnology, and also Chairman of the Board of Directors at Bosch Thermotechnik, AB Sweden, and a member of the Board of Directors of Electra Industry in Israel. And Tom, you've been working on clean heating for more than a decade now, I believe. And I should also note that you're a member of the board of EHPA, so very familiar with this format of discussion, I suppose. And I know that a lot of your passion for driving clean heating technology comes from having two young daughters, and that's the same for me. When I look at my kids, I'm really proud that I work on leaving them with a better planet that hopefully burns less fossil fuels and has more heat pumps. So now let's start the panel discussion. Let me start with you, Joaquim, if I may. And I wanted to kind of get back to the role the single market plays in driving forward the change that we need to see. So the question I have for you is what role the single market has to make it easier for manufacturers of heat pumps to sell their products across the European Union's 27 member states. For the heat pump industry, it's not enough to just bring products to market in one country. Of course, in order to succeed, they need to sell it everywhere. And this is in principle already possible, but in reality, of course, there are local requirements and standards that often add additional requirements that need to be met before product can be successfully sold and installed. So is that something that you actively monitor, and how might we address that challenge of allowing companies to sell in all 27 member states much more easily than perhaps in the past before we had a single market? Joaquim, I'm interested in your thoughts.
So possibly, good morning, and thank you for your flattering introduction of myself. And thank you very much for the organizers for my being here today. I'd say just two short things. On the one hand, we are revising the relevant eco-design and eco-labeling proposals so as to make them more fine-tuned to the inception and promotion of this market on the one hand. But secondly, I think that, and this is a point as a past internal market, I'm still internal market, although I'm now more oriented towards industrial policy, that we need to get our facts and cases right, in the sense that we need to allow, if there is a case, so to be frank and honest, we need to know whether indeed there is a fragmentation at national, regional level of regulations that indeed provokes and creates obstacles and barriers to trade or not. the simple fact of saying, you know, there might be national restrictions and obstacles, and that is a problem. I think that we have to overcome that type of speculation and do a bit of homework. And we'd be happy to be confronted with facts that would show us that the various different national diverging regulations, and I'm assuming a lot of things here, do indeed create an internal market problem to the market. Now, on other regulatory aspects, but that would bring us to possibly to your next questions, I can elaborate more on what Fit for 55 does for the heat pump. But okay, again, just to be clear, at this stage, I don't know if there is an internal market problem for heat pumps.
Thank you. Thank you, Joachim. And indeed, we will come back to some of the issues around the Fit for 55 package in a minute. Tom, you are working for an industry that is actually selling products to markets. And from your perspective, you know, what do you see as kind of the key obstacles you face as a company in selling more heat pumps in the EU single market? What would you like to see being changed, perhaps? Which also comes back to Joachim's point of you know, wanting to hear a bit more about the challenges perhaps that you face as an industry.
Thank you, Jan. So on the one hand, and this is very short-term orientated, we face obstacles in the supply chain coming out of COVID or post-COVID, depending how you want to see the pandemic, which also the automotive industry is facing, having then belts standing still and not producing. That's very short-term. Then more to the midterm, we see installer availability and also installer know-how very critical or on the edge, especially as we go more into renovation cases. There, the installer know-how is essential to make consumers happy, to have a long life-lasting heat pump installation, and there we need more educated and trained installers along the distribution chain. And thirdly, and maybe they're referring to Joachim, it's the locally different regulations which are in place. And I think I already took some homework from today, even after the first 5 minutes of today's debate, because I'm happy, Joachim, to share after our call here exact examples of what we're referring when we are speaking about non-harmonized regulations. That can, so ERP is one thing, and then there are subsidy programs, of course, and that is maybe different than regulations. On the other hand, when subsidies are so high that basically when you don't apply the subsidies, you cannot really sell, then also it does not help when the one country goes for a brine temperature of 0 degrees to make the assessments and the other country goes to a brine temperature of 10 degrees to make the acceptance. Or the one country looks to sound emission in the loudest spot, while the other country looks to sound emission as a design principle. So I think it's very specific, very detailed, and I already take that as a homework. I'm glad to support you there, Joachim. Thanks, Joachim.
Thanks, Thomas, for your insights. And clearly, there's still some work to be done. And I think partly that would be addressed by the Fit for 55 package by having more stringent requirements to reduce emissions across the entire EU and in all 27 member states, which would hopefully also resolve some of those issues. So I already mentioned in the introduction that DG GROW played an important role in developing the Fit for 55 package, especially from an industry perspective. And having witnessed 3 energy packages by now in my career, I have to say that this package is probably the most ambitious, but perhaps also the most challenging package of new energy and climate legislation that we've ever seen in Europe. And the question I have for Joachim is, what would you say does the Fit for 55 package for heat pumps? How will it support the growth in the market that we know needs to happen from European Commission's impact assessments? What do you think how the package will affect the heat pump market, and how will it support it?
Well, I think it can only affect positively, and I think you'd be surprised if I'd say the contrary. And there are a few hints of how. I'll come back to that in a moment. But first of all, I mean, I would just like to say that from the European Commission point of view, this is an industry that we would like to see boosted, and we're very happy with the existence of this possibility of having our gas heating systems replaced by or fossil fuel heating systems replaced by. So we think that this is a great opportunity, and it's something that the European Commission is following closely. So as that, my first intervention was more sort of like a dry legal assessment of the thing, but this is just to give you the sense that we're very much pro this development. Now, on what concretely the package does, I would say that possibly, and to start with one of the points that Tom made before about training, that the Renewable Energy Directive 2 is amended by obliging member states to put in place measures to support participation in training programs. So the previous possibility for member states to make the list of qualified installers public becomes a requirement. So this is a hint that the European Commission has made its own the preoccupation that servicing at installation and after sales is a very important aspect that needs to be developed in order to foster the development of this market. Then also, member states are now encouraged under Renewable Energy Directive 3 to set national targets on renewable sources and in the building sector. But not only that, they are also encouraged to introduce measures in building regulations and support schemes that aim to increase the share not only of electricity, but also of heating and cooling from renewable sources. So I think that this encouragement to the member states is a strong hint and a push for the development of this industry. But thirdly, and possibly even more important, we all know that according to Article 6 of the Energy Efficiency Directive proposal, all public authorities have to renovate 3% of their buildings' floor space each year to be nearly zero energy buildings. And we think that this will be a strong pointer towards what needs to be done to develop this market.
Thank you, Joachim. And now return to Tom from an industry perspective. Of course, we still have a lot of change that might come in what's currently in the package. There will be many long nights of intense negotiations between the Commission, the Parliament, and the Council, and we don't know yet what the final outcome will be. It will certainly change to some extent, but I think the sort of key principles are well established. But from your perspective, Tom, working for the industry, what would you hope for that would remain in the package? Where would you like to see the package perhaps being strengthened? What are your hopes? What would you like to see happening as we approach the finalization of these proposals?
Maybe, Jan, let me start by congratulating Joachim and the EU Union, and foremost to underscore that I find the Fit for 55 program and the new Green Deal really essential for EU business environment, and that I'm in this context super proud to be a EU citizen and play my part also as a businessman to make it happen during the implementation. I think what I also want to point out, Joachim, is that I find it great that you not only look to suppliers, but also the whole value chain to installers, trainings, and so on, that we really can implement it. So basically my wish is very simple, and that wish is keep it simple. So sometimes we have regulations which we talked about being harmonized, but sometimes also we have regulations where you need one developer to implement it, but 10 lawyers to tell the developer what he shall implement. And those 10 lawyers, I think we don't need in the future. I would go for keep it simple, keep it harmonized, and have clear priorities so that the industry has a clear guidance where to invest, where to drive for innovation, and where to put now the money that we together can implement the new Green Deal for Europe.
Thank you, Tom. Sounds like you're enthusiastic about the proposals. I think I share that enthusiasm.
Jan, are you muted?
I should not be. Can you not hear me anymore?
I can hear you, yeah, I can hear you.
You can?
Yeah.
I think, Tom, the problem might be at your end. Joachim says he can hear me. I think the next question is for you, Joachim, so we hope that Tom will return by the time we finish that point of the discussion. So I think the other issue that, of course, is on people's mind is COVID and the economic recovery. We're still doing events like this that are hybrid events because of that. And what I wanted to ask you, Joachim, is as part of the recovery after COVID, we're seeing a lot of governments around the world setting up pretty ambitious programs for economic recovery. And Europe, of course, is no exception. And we also have much more ambitious climate goals in Europe. So the question, I guess, that I have for you is, how do you think does economic recovery after COVID and meeting the much more ambitious climate goals go together? And what does this mean for heat pumps specifically? Where do you see the economic benefits of doing that? You already mentioned that you think it's a key market, a key technology. You would like that to be boosted. And from your perspective, representing DG Grow and representing the angle of the economy, what sort of benefits do you think could be delivered if you really succeed in this?
I lost you.
Did you not hear my question, Joachim?
I think, okay. Well, now I think I got, okay. There was a scary second or two where I didn't get you, but I think I've got enough information to provide you a reply. So, look, I think the member states have taken up the challenge of Next Generation EU on renovation of buildings quite seriously, which should be good news for this industry. We know that 75% of Europe's buildings are inefficient and in need of renovation, and we need to double the rate of renovation, which would mean upgrading 35 million buildings in the next decade. We think 160,000 jobs could be created. So the member states were asked to provide 37% of their plan on greening, Green Deal related expenditure. And we've met that. We've got at least 61 billion in the national recovery and resilience plans, which are going towards construction and mostly to renovate buildings. So we would simply at this stage invite you to engage with DG Grow on the construction and renewables ecosystem transition pathways, because as you know, or you probably know, we are launching transition pathways on digitalization, on greening, and on resilience, on a series of ecosystems that we have identified, one of them being construction.
Thank you. And of course, if we no longer rely on importing fossil fuels from overseas, but we generate energy domestically, and if we deploy new technologies that will create jobs and will potentially create more jobs than just continuing to import energy from overseas. So there's a real opportunity for Europe to grow the green economy. And of course, all of this.
DG Grow does. Yes.
Great.
Sorry.
No worries. And of course, this will also lead to more innovation potentially in the industry itself. If we have an expanding market and we see more growth of the heat pump industry. So Tom, question to you. I hope you can now hear me.
All good.
You're back. Excellent. So the question I have for you is, and you're working, at the cutting edge of this, of course, at Bosch. Where do you see kind of the key innovations happening, as we grow the heat pump market? What do you think the benefits of that could be for consumers? Get a heat pump installed. What sort of new exciting products and services do you see sort of coming to market without giving away too much from your internal strategy, of course? But then, what sort of general trends do you observe in the industry now that we can truly see a path towards much accelerated growth?
Yeah, So first, I'd like to point out that even today, I think heat pumps are ready for mass deployment. So it's not that the basic technology is not ready. I think we've overcome that. Heat pumps are ready for mass deployment in new build and in renovation. However, of course, when the market grows, there comes more investments, more need for differentiation between the different competitors in the landscape, which I like, also which it motivates me and my team. And I see basically three areas of big innovation. Innovation comes in the area of acoustics, psychoacoustics that you cannot even recognize anymore, heat pump in your house. There, from a Bosch side, we are collaborating, for instance, with our colleagues from DSH, producing very silent dishwashers and fridges. So when you can put it in your living room, basically, then no worry, you can also run a silent heat pump with that technology. Then comes, when we go more towards renovation, we will see innovation in the terms of efficiency, especially on cold outdoor temperatures, because of course it's not really rocket science to make an efficient heat pump in warm outdoor temperatures, but at -10, -15, -20, to be then they're very efficient. I think there will be see innovation in the area of compressors, components, but also how to apply natural refrigerants. And third, I think on the system scale and also sector coupling, we will see innovation. And there we cooperate with colleagues from the AI world, internally and externally, because one company alone will not make it happen. It will be companies across the supply chain and also from the electric universe to really bring also system and service innovation towards the consumers.
Thanks, Tom. I mean, we keep hearing that buildings are simply not ready for heat pumps, and maybe never will be. That's an argument that's being put forward quite prominently by some people. And I just wonder what you make of that. Being involved in installing these products in different buildings all over Europe. What do you say to people who kind of make that case?
Well, I tell them my own example. I mean, my own house is, of course, fully electrified. But I tell them the example of my father's farm, who by coincidence owned or is owning a farm out of the 1750s up in the Black Forest. And also that we will now turn from oil to a heat pump. And I would never do that if I would not believe in that. And I think this is the strength of our industry, that we from the heat pump universe, we are not just talking, we are also doing. And we believe in what we do, and we take it home, we take it to our families. However, I also want to state that you always need to treat it also humbly, or with humbleness. So you cannot just put every heat pump in every house, in every location. That's impossible. You need to plan, you need to put good caution. And now doing that in my personal exercise with my father, I think the biggest struggle was not to select the heat pump. The biggest struggle is to find then the installer from the heat pump side, to match with the PV for the roof, to match with the hydraulics in a house, to also make the energy calculation for the house. And that is when you have a house from the 70s or 17th century, then it's a bit harder to make all that happen. But it's possible, but you need to take good caution and effort for that, Jan.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, my house is 140 years old, and we have a heat pump since 2019, and it's really important to get a good installer who understands the technology. I fully agree with that. I have a sort of last set of questions before we can conclude. Just looking at the time, I think we still have about 5 to 10 minutes left because we started late. So that should be well within the time frame we've been given. So I have a question for Joachim again, and this goes back to the previous panel discussion about carbon pricing to some extent. And this is it's around kind of social justice and the fair transition. We often hear, and the same happens with electric vehicles, that this is all very well, but it's really just a project for very wealthy households and for businesses that can afford this. So how can we make sure that it's not just a project for those who are well off and wealthy, but how can we make sure that everybody in Europe can benefit from this growth in clean heating technology and heat pumps? How can we overcome that?
Okay, in the context of Fit for 55, I'll just sort of throw numbers at you all. So the Climate Social Fund, set up with the Fit for 55 legislative package, has mobilized 144 billion euros during the period 2025-2032, which is going to be pretty topical. And it will be an important tool to tackle energy poverty and the social consequences resulting from the increase in prices of fossil fuels. We've also got as a flagship of the renovation wave, and in the context of the recovery package, we are currently setting up the Affordable Housing Initiative. This will provide support to local long-term public-private partnerships for implementing renovation projects. There's a call for proposals under the Single Market Program of 1.2 million euro, launching a new level cross-sectoral consortium to provide support and coordination for the implementation of renovation projects. And there's also a call under Horizon Europe of 10 million euros supporting the innovation pilots within the 4 renovation projects of social and affordable housing district demonstrators. But I think the biggest figure is the one I quoted to you at the beginning. I mean, 144 billion euro for the period 2025 to 2032, the Climate Social Fund. So we're fully aware of the need to address the social question brought forward by all of this.
Thank you, Joachim, and I'm sure there will be some interesting discussions in the coming months, how exactly the facility will be designed and how to use carbon revenues and all these questions. Tom, final question also to you on the same topic. What do you as an industry do to reduce costs and to make it more affordable?
So in the end, it's important, I think, for the consumer to get an affordable package. So let's differentiate investment cost and running cost. From the investment cost, we are working, of course, economies of scale help us, but then we're also working on design to cost, design for automation to bring production costs down. On the system level, we are working with algorithms, so you can also spare components that you don't need anymore in the future, and also to allow by training to size the systems right, because certainly when you oversize, then you pay more. On the contrary, on the other hand, on short term, we have material prices increasing at the moment due to the situation, supply chain, steel, everything going up. So at the moment, it's a bit of a struggle, but with the products to come in the portfolio to come, it will only go in one direction. For our running costs, we do the same. We make service easy. We make service being done remotely. We're increasing efficiency, so their consumers will have a support and a backwind. And I think there a main topic for the running cost will be energy taxation in the future, where we as industry can unfortunately not do much. But I find it energy taxation, looking to electricity prices across Europe, I think there's also a big lever depending on the country to reduce the cost to make heat pumps affordable for everybody.
Thanks, Tom. Before we leave the panel, just a final question. Next time your heating system breaks down and you replace it, do you already know what you're going to replace it with? Tom, are you going to stick with your heat pump? And Joachim, have you been inspired enough to install one?
Well, I can share a fun fact. I mean, I will keep my heat pump, but I might change the producer. Huh? Because the initial one I did not pick.
It's certainly an idea that I could have in mind, yeah.
Very good. Well, thank you so much for participating.
Thanks.
I look forward to the other sessions of the forum, and hopefully we can meet in person one day and discuss this interesting topic once the proposals are finalized and once we know what's happening with Fit for 55. Thank you so much. Joachim, thank you very much. Tom, I wish you all an excellent forum, an excellent discussion, and thanks for inviting us all for this panel.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And a good day to all of you. Thank you. Bye.
Ciao, Joachim.
Well, wonderful.
Ciao.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Jan. Thank you again, Joachim and Tom. I take with me home that heat pumps work everywhere, and they will become cheaper and easier to use. And I think that is very essential in a mass market that we are all anticipate and hope for.